right, guys, I'm here to talk to you about the kingdom Animalia and the different phyla. So we have the domain Eukarya, the kingdom Animalia, and what I did with you is look at the different phyla. So we take it a step down, a little bit more specific in Animalia, because while they're interesting, animals are interesting for one thing. And it's really good for you to know that you belong to the same kingdom as all these other life forms, because really most of you wouldn't know that until you finish this course, okay? I didn't give you those videos to torture you. I actually wanted you to watch those videos so that you could see pictures of animals that I'm not able to provide in a presentation like that woman did. So I know that I had the note and I could have shared it with you earlier. I'm not trying to be mean to you. I really wanted you to do some work and some background work so that when I go through this with you, you can visualize these different organisms and you've done some work, okay? So I'm going to go through this note with you. You have it. It's on the LMS site now. And this is pretty much your answer key for that video. And I will give you answers to the other questions in another video on today's LMS page, okay, on today's date. All right, so we've got the kingdom Porifera. So what do you need to know quickly about Porifera? They are called the sponges, all right? Their habitat is marine. So mostly when you see marine, this is something also that you might not know yet. Marine means salt water, as opposed to fresh water, which is not salt water. So when you see the term marine, think, okay, oceans, salt water, that type of thing. They have a porous body, all right? So be aware that a sponge, like if you have a sponge in your kitchen, you've got probably a takeoff on the real sponge. So way back, maybe I'm going to say like 60, 70 years ago, they weren't making fake sponges. So when somebody had a sponge, it was the real animal. So they would take it out of the ocean, they'd harvest them, and people would use them to clean, okay? You can still buy them today, but they're very expensive compared to the man-made type of sponge. So this sponge is porous, it absorbs, right? It allows water to pass through the animal. And how does that work for the animal? The animal gets to feed through these pores. So as food passes through these little black dots here, the animal feeds, okay? They're sessile, meaning they don't move, okay? Sessile is like saying non-motile. So I'm going to write that out for you. Sessile means non-motile, and motile means you can move. So these guys don't move. All right, and they belong to the same kingdom as you and I. So they are attached to shells or rocks, etc., and that's how they feed us through those pores. Okay. The other thing you want to know, and I've divided everything up here in categories to be very, very straightforward. These guys are asymmetrical. Okay, so they don't show any symmetry, which means they don't have a shape. We're going to go forward. I'm going to teach you what symmetry means in a few minutes and the different types of symmetry. I also believe you should have gotten that from the video. Okay. So, Coelenterata, or also known as the cnidarians. So you could also see, sorry, I'm just readjusting here so that you guys can see what I'm working on. Sorry, the phone is shaking with the tape today. These guys are also known as cnidaria. All right, so this is I think this is the new term and that's the old term, or vice versa. But I don't know why they changed the name. I can't tell you that. So that's a cnidaria. These guys are one and the same in terms of the phylum. Okay, and this is going to include your jellyfish, your hydras, your corals. So you can all picture jellyfish, and that's why I picked that picture for you. All right, they are marine organisms. Okay, so that means that they need to have salt water. Body plan. Their body wall, now this is going to become different as we move through these different phyla. They have an ectoderm and an endoderm. The ectoderm is going to be on the outside, that's the outside of the body layer, or the body, that's the inside of the body. Okay, so when you see ecto, think outside. When you see endo, think inside. So their body is a bit more simple than the rest of the bodies as we go through this. They've got 2 layers, all right? And then it's a jelly-like material found between these 2 layers, and you can picture that with a jellyfish, hence the name jellyfish, right? The digestive system is incomplete, okay? And that means it has just one opening. So whatever they take in as food, they will also expel through the exact same spot as waste. So they take in their food and they get rid of their waste in the same opening. So the single opening serves as both a mouth and an anus. They are radially symmetrical. Okay, so here's the point where I'm going to say to you, you and I are bilaterally symmetrical. And again, if you did a good job looking at that video, you're going to already understand this. You and I have a left side and a right side. Okay? So we could actually just see that if we cut ourselves right down the middle, we'd have a side. Now that's called bilaterally symmetrical. So that's bilateral symmetry. Okay? When you look at, and you know my artistic abilities are extremely limited, but when you look at a jellyfish, okay, and let's say that we're looking at it from the bird's eye view, okay, so we're looking at it from above, and this is what you have to do with radial symmetry, okay, and I know it doesn't look like this, it's got thinner tentacles, but we're just going to pretend this is what a jellyfish looks like, and we're looking at it from the top of its head, okay, so we're looking down at it. What you can say with radial symmetry is you could cut any of these portions out and they would be identical, okay? So radial symmetry says this is the same as this. So if we were to cut this into different sections, 1, 2, 3, it is radially symmetrical from a bird's eye view from above, looking at the top of the head, the crown of the head, and looking around at the appendages, okay? That's radially symmetrical. Whoops, radially symmetrical. Okay, or radial symmetry. Okay, and so that's an important point to stop and look at. All right, they're specialized cells. They have tentacles. All right, interesting fact, those tentacles sting. You probably know that already. Some of you have been stung by a jellyfish, probably in the ocean in Florida or anywhere else you might have gone. Why do they have those? Well, protection, so you and I don't hurt them. And when they sting their food, they can capture it more easily. So their bodies contain a nerve network that allows the movement of tentacles in the body. So they have nerves. Okay, they have a nervous network. All right, moving forward. We now have our platyhelminthes, okay? So when I see this word, I always think flat, all right? Because that is actually like the Latin word for flat. So look over here, you've got LAT, you've got LAT. So platyhelminthes are flatworms. So they're flat, literally like flat, like pieces of tape, okay? And that's why that's called a tapeworm. So they can live in fresh and salt water, and they can live on land, all right? So we're getting into animals that have a more diverse habitat. Their body plan, okay, they have flattened bodies, all right? And I've said that already now. These guys have 3 distinct tissue layers when they're developing. So they definitely have an ectoderm, an endoderm, and a mesoderm. And then each layer gives rise to various organs and systems in this animal, okay? When we get into chordata, the chordates, I'll go over what these guys mean, okay? The digestive system is incomplete, okay? So these are some distinguishing features with these guys. It's incomplete, which means it has only a single opening, okay? So moving forward, you're not going to study any of this in 4U. When you get into first year university, if you are going to take a biology, they're going to expect you to know this. Or yes, they are going to expect you to know that you've covered this. So these are things that I'm teaching you because I know that going forward, they're going to want you to know that. Okay, so the difference between a single opening and a double opening. The parasitic tapeworm has no need for a digestive system because it absorbs nutrients that are already digested by the host. So what am I saying? Sometimes you can have a parasite in this category, all right? And they're just going to digest via like diffusion, basically, absorption, okay? So they're going to live in the intestines of the host, and they're just going to absorb through their thin skin layer all the nutrients there. These guys are bilaterally symmetrical. So in other words, you've got your diagram here. You can cut this guy right down the middle and see that he has a left side and a right side, okay? That's bilateral symmetry. In addition to that, they have a head region and a tail region. All right, and what's interesting about these guys, just some interesting facts that make them different than others. Well, some of them, like the tapeworm, are parasitic, okay? They have a protective cuticle. Why do they have a protective cuticle? It keeps them from being digested by strong digestive enzymes of the host. So these guys will serve as parasites, rather repulsive, right? They can live in animals, other animals, and they can just take our food, all right? Planaria has eye spots, and we can see those eye spots there. All right, so I'm not going to ask you anything about that, but it's good for you to have this information. Nematodes are roundworms. Okay, so I think I have a picture of a roundworm on the next page. Yes, I do. Perfect. Okay. They can live, again, in fresh, salt, and no water. All right. Their body plan, they are long, smooth, and unsegmented. So when we get to the next type of worm, I'm going to show you what a segment is. All right. So they can be extremely long, very smooth, and unsegmented. Cylindrical bodies are tapered at both ends and are covered by a protective cuticle. So we've got that cuticle again, and we've got the ectoderm, the endoderm, and the mesoderm. All right. Digestive system, they have a complete digestive system, which means they have two openings. Okay. They've got a mouth and they have an anus. So we're seeing an organism now that has a complete digestive system. They show bilateral symmetry. They have an anterior, which means a top, and a posterior, which means back end. All right, and then just looking at this organism here, this is your roundworm, okay? Whoops, yeah, roundworm. Sorry for the little bit of movement here. So these guys, okay, round, not flat, okay, bilaterally symmetrical. Interesting facts. I said free-living roundworms are extremely plentiful in soil and are essential in producing quality. So they serve a very good purpose in terms of the ecosystem. Bad fact, they can become parasites in children, okay? So they're parasitic. All right, here we go into annelids now. Annelids are segmented, okay? So annelids are segmented. The one I think of often, as soon as I hear annelid, I think earthworm. So an earthworm, and you can see here with this organism, they have these little segments, and this is what we mean by segments. So you can actually see the divisions of the organism, okay, with those lines. So I know you can picture an earthworm, very similar, and as soon as you see these segments here, these divisions, tiny little pieces that are put together, that's an annelid, okay? So where does an annelid live? It lives in marine water, fresh water, and it lives on land. Okay, so it can live in any one of these places. You can have a worm living in water. Okay, body plan similar to the roundworm. Okay, except that you've got segments. All right, and the segments are internal and external, and that allows them, not something you need to know, but it allows them a quicker response to their environment. So think about when you touch an earthworm, it curls up. Okay, it responds very quickly. Digestive system is complete. It has a mouth and an anus, all right? And it's often referred to as a tube within a tube body plan. So there's a little bit more complexity here. In terms of symmetry, it's bilaterally symmetrical, okay? It has a top end and it has a bottom end. And it has a dorsal surface and a ventral surface. So what are we saying here? It has a back, and this is what you would call like your stomach. So you'd say if somebody asked you to lay on your ventral surface, you would lay on your stomach, okay? So we're not gonna say that, we're gonna call it your tummy, all right? So if you laid on your tummy when you were little, or maybe still do, that's your ventral surface, okay? Your back surface, your bottom end, your top end. So towards the head, towards the bottom. All right, moving on. You have the arthropods. So the arthropods, I said, are the most successful organisms in the plant kingdom, okay? Because there's such a great diversity of them. So the arthropods are your insects, basically, okay? Basically, but you've got others. So arthropods include insects, spiders, crustaceans, all right? They're found in all environments. They are so successful they can get into any environment and do well. Okay, they've developed and evolved to suit almost any environment. So their success, the most successful of any group, due to the success of insects, because there are so many different types of insects. Their body plan is they're segmented. Okay, they've got jointed appendages. So what does that mean? That means they basically have a knee. Okay, so for lack of a better word, this is the joint. Look at this spider, okay? It can bend its leg. It can bend its leg. So that means it's a jointed appendage, all right? And that allows it to walk, swim, fly, grab, fight, all of those things that I listed there, all right? And in most cases, most arthropods have a body that is divided that you can see. So in other words, it has a head, okay? It has an abdomen, and it has a thorax. So it has a head, it has a chest, and it has an abdomen. And that's what we're saying here. That's what I put in my note. In addition to that, these guys have an interesting feature that other animals do not. They have an exoskeleton. So they have evolved to put their hard part of their body on the outside. You and I keep the hard part inside. So we have our bones and our spinal cord inside, protected by flesh. They've gone with the opposite strategy and done extremely well. So they've put their flesh inside and protected it with a hard outer covering. And so that is called, the outside skeleton is called the exoskeleton. Keep in mind, as you move on, that is made of a chemical called chitin. Chitin is a polysaccharide. What does that mean to you? It means it's a sugar, okay? And we're going to head into animal systems before you know it, okay? So I am definitely on track with you guys. Don't worry that we're still in diversity. We've got lots of time now that the exams have been canceled, okay? So there is a polysaccharide, chitin is a polysaccharide, which means it's a long, long sugar, all right? And it's a structural sugar. It actually protects their body. It's made, their exoskeleton is made of that, all right? And it prevents water loss as well, and that's in that sentence there. Okay, rotifers, I know that you probably haven't heard of before you started studying this kingdom. So rotifers, always think of wheeled animals, okay? And why are they called wheeled animals? Because their mouth here, this region, spins. So the video might have showed you that in actual motion. If not, take a moment and look up a rotifer video and you can actually see that spinning, okay? They live in fresh water and some pockets surrounding soil in the ground, all right? So these are freshwater organisms. And if there's a grouping of soil like groundwater, they will live there as well. Okay, sorry, grouping of water. Body plan, they are small and soft, okay? But they've got really hard jaws, all right? They're multicellular with body cavities that are partially lined by a mesoderm. So we've got 3 different sections here. I'm not going to ask you that. They have organ systems, okay? So getting more and more complex. And those organ systems are systems that are uniquely animal. They're not plant. They have a mouth and an anus, so that gives them a complete digestive system. Interesting thing about these guys is that they can reproduce asexually or they can reproduce sexually. So you know what sexually means. The sperm and the egg are going to meet. Okay, asexually is when the females are in times of stress, or they might need more females because the population is low. The females can go through a process called parthenogenesis, where they hatch eggs that are not fertilized, and those give rise, because they're not fertilized, to all females, okay? So if we are in school next year and you are taking 4U biology, I order in Daphnia for the grade 12s, and when the Daphnia gets stressed, we actually see this happen, okay? So they've got little black eggs inside of them, and they let them go because they think they're dying under the microscope, and so they give birth to these unfertilized eggs, all right? Wheeled animal, rapid movements of cilia around their mouths look like a spinning of a wheel, and I've said that to you. So that's really why they're called rotifers, okay? And wheeled animals. All right, we are getting there. So the 8th phylum, okay, just moving my contraption here that you guys have now seen. The 8th phylum is Mollusca. So I don't know how I've put it together in my brain, but I know that Mollusca has a shell, okay? So these guys have some form of a shell. Okay, in most cases, obviously an octopus does not, but I think of the snail every time I think of Mollusca. So you've got your habitat is marine and freshwater, and they live on land, because you can have snails that live on land, and you can have water snails. Mollusca have soft, unsegmented bodies. So when you look at this picture here, okay, you don't see the segments of the earthworm. It's just one big body. They often move with a muscular foot, and that's why I picked the snail, because the muscular foot is underneath. Okay, so that's something that you should also think of when you think of mollusca. All right, a strong muscular foot on its ventral surface. All right. The radula, mollusks are well known for their tongue-like organ called a radula. All right. If you've ever had a snail in your hand, you'll feel that. Like it feels like if the snail sticks its tongue out and you can actually see the little tongue coming out, you can feel the tongue because it has these little teeth on it. All right. And it's just looking for food. It's trying to scrape your hand for food. And then there's a mantle that surrounds the body organs, and that mantle is a gland, and it's capable of secretion. All right. And the secretions help harden to make the shells of mollusks. So important there that they have a shell. All right. And they show bilateral symmetry. So in other words, this thing has a right side and a left side. Echinodermata, we have sea stars. So we're going to see a different type of symmetry here again, and sea urchins. All right. And this is, unfortunately, you're not with me. You would have been able to do a lab where I have these guys in a bottle and you would identify them according to their phylum. So I've come up with an assignment. You'll see that in a moment, where you're going to identify different organisms into their phylum. Okay, it's not anything like what you would do in a lab, but it's still something that makes you think. And even if you are cheating and looking things up on the internet, you're still doing the assignment and categorizing. And so I have to be okay with that, and that's all right. So habitat, all marine living, mainly on the ocean floor. So these guys are all saltwater organisms. They have an internal slimy skeleton, okay, and a spiny outside surface or skin. All right, these structures give both support and protection. Water vascular system, they, like sea stars and sea urchins, are well known for their water vascular system. You might have seen this, okay, in videos, and if not, I suggest you look it up. Consists of water-filled tubes that run through their body, so very different than other organisms, especially in this kingdom. They move water in and out of the tubes, and they can look like jets. Okay, so these organisms actually have things that look like jets of water. Why do they do that? They can act as suction cups. Okay, so interesting. Digestive system is complete. It has two sides, two entrances, or an entrance and an exit. And this guy is radially symmetrical. So this is our perfect example. This guy could be cut into 5 identical pieces. Okay, so if we were to cut each of these pieces off, they would be identical. And I don't suggest looking for a starfish to splice it up. But what you can know is that they keep their stem cells. As soon as they lose one arm, this arm can be regenerated into a whole new organism. And the other organism, the original organism that was left behind, will grow that arm back. Okay, so interesting fact there for those guys. And then we go into chordata, which ultimately probably would have been if I said think of animals, this is what you would think of. Okay, you might not have thought of a fish. Okay, that's why I put that in there. They belong to the same phylum we do, the same domain, the same kingdom, the same phylum. That's how similar we are to a fish. So chordates include all of these things, okay, just for your reference. Fish, reptiles, amphibians, birds, mammals. You've now learned that a sponge is an animal. So you have to see how closely related we are to these guys. And this is the one thing, not the one thing, but this is what I really love about this part of the unit, is that I get to tell you guys how similar you are to a fish. So you might not have thought about it, but just take a second now and think. Fish aren't bacteria. They're not archaea. They're not protists. They're not fungi. They're not plants. Okay, and so not only are they in eukarya and in animalia, but they're a chordate. So we have so many more similarities to these guys. When you look at these things that you see most frequently in the animal kingdom, then we have differences. So habitat, we can live anywhere. So I'm going to say we because this is us as well. Symmetry, definitely we have a right side and a left side. So chordata have a left side and a right side. We have a dorsal nerve cord. Okay, so we have this dorsal nerve cord. When it first forms, it is called a notochord. So when you and I were forming, when we were embryos, we were forming a notochord, and that notochord became your spine. As soon as it started to turn into a spine, that's when you're called a fetus, okay? And some organisms, as we go through evolution, and you looked at evolution, I showed you all those different embryos, and I said, okay, now pick the one you think is human. Remember, we had rabbit on there. We had a salamander, we had a fish, I think we had a chicken. And everything looks really very much the same at the beginning of life. So what's my point? Some organisms just hang on to the notochord. They don't actually develop a spinal cord, but that still puts them in the phylum Chordata. All right, so they have a notochord. It remains stiff and flexible. So as long as you have the beginnings of a spinal cord, you are considered a chordate. All right, in vertebrates, cartilage or bone replaces the notochord, and so that's going to be another division of this phylum, okay, is the vertebrate. And that would distinguish between, like, this guy would be a vertebrate because he definitely has, or she has, a spinal cord. All right, and so that is the end of the animal lesson. I hope that you've learned something from that. I'm going to take your homework up and I'll attach that video also to this page for this date. And we are now heading into Plantae. I don't often tell you where we're headed, so I'm going to take this moment and tell you that we're going to go into plant, okay? And then we're going to go into viruses. I'm going to give you a quiz on everything we've done since archaea and bacteria and the original taxonomy. And then we're going to finish up with why is biodiversity important, and then we start at the end of next week. I'm planning the end of next week. We will start animal systems.